Hi, this is the Next in the Lab series focused on answering the question, how can I add an empty directory to my Git repository? So this is actually surprisingly asked quite a bit by developers that are working with Git that are accustomed to working with other software control systems such as Subversion or Perforce or any other systems that actually support having an empty folder. Git seems to have a bit of a philosophy that if there's nothing inside the folder shouldn't be there in the first place. And that's kind of evident by the fact that you can't directly add a folder to the project. It's got to have something in it, and then the folder just gets added automatically. So what you need to do is, if you want to have a folder inside the project, you need to do either one, add a file inside the project, and some people add files to the project just as an empty project or an empty file. So we're going to make a folder called blank folder. And so if we go inside blank folder, typically if what you would do inside of blank folder, if you wanted a folder, people sometimes create a file, so you can call touch, which basically just creates a file, and people add a file called empty inside of the folder to guarantee that it'll be empty. And that does work. However, you actually do have a file inside of there. And in some cases where software projects where, let's say you have a binary folder, and the binary folder should always be there, but it shouldn't have anything in it because you don't want to ship a binary with your source code. That might be a different scenario. So this is a unique solution. So it's centered around making a directory that always stays empty. So all files submitted to this folder will be ignored, but it guarantees that in your repository the file or the folder will always be present. So in my folder, I've got nothing in here currently. I'm inside the folder called blank folder. In my text editor, I'm going to pull up this blank folder, and I'm going to create in Sublime Text, I'm going to create a new file. And so I'm going to create this file. It's a git ignore file, and these are a .git ignore file or commands to Git to tell it how to interact with files in this folder. So we're going to say ignore everything in this directory. And we're going to say star, so meaning ignore absolutely everything except this file. So we're going to say ignore everything except for the git ignore file. So that's what this file we're going to save it as. So now I've typed this in, we'll save our file. Pull this over so you guys can see it. We're going to save it as .git ignore. So say yes, .file is reserved for the system. Yes, please create that file. So if I go back to my file, you can see, or up to my terminal here, you can see the git ignore file has been made. Let's add the git ignore file to my push. So go back to my main folder. I'm going to type git status so I can get the status of my change. And you can see git ignore file is present and ready to be committed. So this is technically a file, but it's a dot file. So for those of you that are Linux users, git ignore dot files are commands to Git to tell it what to do, and they're hidden usually. And on Windows, because you're using a bash emulator, Windows users can also leverage this just within the Git windows themselves. So I'm going to add push this up to the repository. So I'm going to type git commit am, meaning commit all changes, added blank folder. Okay, and now I'm going to push this up to the repository with the git push command. Lovely, git push is there. So now, just like in earlier labs, this is user 1. I'm going to go to the labs 2, user 2 over here, and I'm going to run a git pull and get the latest changes down. And as you can see, blank folder arrived, and if I list all the files in the folder, you can see blank folder is there, and it's empty with the git ignore file. So that's in a nutshell how to create an empty folder in your Git repository. Again, the key note here is this solution with the git ignore file tells Git to ignore absolutely everything in the folder except for git ignore file. So if I add a file here, it will not propagate. So I'll say touch foo. And so I'll create a file called foo in there. And we git add foo. So you can see the following paths were ignored by your git ignore. blank folder foo, use the F if you really want to add them. So in this case, if you wanted to add a folder, you would actually remove your git ignore file, add foo, and then the folder would get created, but it would no longer be empty. So this is a solution specifically just to ensure that your project always has an empty folder in it, regardless of when you pull it down.